Welcome to another episode of the Wine and Chisme podcast. Oh my gosh, I can't believe this year is just flying by. And today we have Arivee Vargas with us. How are you, Arivee?
Good. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I'm so glad you're here because you've had quite a journey in your life, in your career, and I can't wait to get into the chisme of all of that. However, before we start the chisme, we always start with the wine. Now, I'm not sure if you're drinking any wine today or not, but if you are, please share with us what you're drinking. If you're not, if it's just water, what is your normal go-to as far as if you drink cocktails or not?
Oh, okay. So I'm not drinking wine right now, but I do like a really good Riesling. But that's not so that's my preferred wine if I'm drinking wine. The other, I would say the other drink that I really actually do like and that I enjoy is Casamigos Reposado with tonic and lime. Like that is what I will have as my go-to if I'm ever in the mood for a cocktail. Or if a restaurant has like a really fun cocktail with tequila in it, I'll
Yeah.
try it. But I always make sure that the tequila is good. Like it's
Yeah.
gotta be good tequila.
So do you like mezcal at all?
I no, I don't like smoky.
Oh,
I
see,
don't. I know.
I actually, I've realized I end up liking mezcal more than tequila.
Oh my gosh, no. Tequila is like mezcal too. It's too smoky for me, and it feels spicy to me. I don't know why, but it
Maybe
does.
that's why I like it because I like spicy.
Ah.
I like that smokiness, especially in mixed cocktails. I'd rather have mezcal than tequila.
Oh wow. Okay. Okay. Well, that's
Yeah,
fun.
yeah. So I do like that. Well, I am, of course, drinking wine, duh. And I'm actually drinking, we've had this, you know, we had this weird heat wave, and not just this heat wave here in San Diego, but it was humid. It's been really
Mhm.
humid. And so I was like, you know what? Like, I'm actually even recording in my bedroom, although you can't tell, thank goodness, because I the dog sleeping behind me, my headboard back here, like it wouldn't look cute. But the bedroom, because we don't get any direct sunlight in the bedroom because we have like a wall and then it's the wall to the living room, um, is the coolest place in the house. So actually that's where I'm recording today out of my bedroom. And so I'm like, oh, I can close the window. It still can retain some, coolness, but it's
Yeah.
been so humid. So I'm actually drinking one of my favorite white wines, which is Seis white blend. And it's
Oh.
a blend between Grenache Blanc and Albarino.
Oh wow. Okay.
And it is so good. Like I've said this so many times, but if you've never heard an episode and this is the first one you're joining, you wouldn't know. I used to think, oh, I don't like white wines. I don't like white wines because I think oftentimes I would think of like a sweeter wine, like a Riesling, because I'm not a big sweet wine person,
Right.
right? Or a Chardonnay, but barrel-aged Chardonnays, which are tend to be more heavy and buttery.
Mm.
And then as I got into everything with the Wine and Cheese, my podcast, I started realizing all of the different wines that I liked. I like Sauvignon Blancs as long as they're not from Australia. Well, as long as they're not too grapefruit forward, which
Mm.
New Zealand Sauvignon Blancs are very grapefruit forward. Um, I do like Chardonnays if they are steel barrel aged or even a mix of steel barrel and oak barrel, because then they're not as heavy. They're
Mm.
more fruity, they're more citrusy, they don't have that buttery taste. I have found a couple of reasons that I do actually enjoy because they aren't so sweet.
Yeah.
And I think that's the beauty of wine is it's so subjective, right? And you could have, in fact, having these events, one in San Diego, one in New York, really focusing on wine and focusing on different areas. So, for example, having a Napa wine versus a New York wine versus
Yeah.
a Temecula wine or an Oregon wine, they could all be a Cabernet, but they could all taste totally different.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
well, salud.
Salud with my water and my lemon.
There you go. Hey, no, there's no shame in the no wine game, unless it's me, of course. Then there would be a problem. There would be like, well, there is no wine with this chisme. Well, let me read your bio and then we will get into the chisme.
Okay.
Arivee Vargas is a certified executive coach and founder and CEO of Humble Rising LLC, which empowers high achieving women leaders and lawyers to have more joy, fulfillment, and personal alignment. She hosts the Humble Rising podcast and is a sought after speaker and thought leader on topics of women's empowerment, how to prevent burnout, work life harmony, career development, and navigating the intersection of multiple identities as a Latina, mother, leader, and lawyer. As a first generation Latina with over 15 years of experience as a lawyer in law firms and in house, as well as a human resources leadership roles, Arivee specializes in helping high achieving first generation and women of color professionals navigate personal inflection points, enabling them to move forward in their careers and lives with greater intention and purpose. Arivee is the author of Your Time to Rise, Unlearn Limiting Beliefs, Unlock Your Power, and Unleash Your Truest Self, which will be coming out in January of 2025. Arivee has received numerous accolades, including being named a LinkedIn Top Thought Leadership Voice, Top 15 Coach in Boston in 2022, 23, and 24, and has been featured in Boston College Magazine and Boston Business Journal. She's the recipient of multiple awards and recognitions, including being honored as one of Boston Recipient Journal's 40 Under 40 and Latina Leader in Hispanic Executive Magazine. Her work has been featured in Oprah Daily, Forbes, Success Magazine, Authority Magazine, Fierce by Me Too, Your Tango, Thrive Global, Biz Women, and the Mother Chapter, among others. And so this Dominicana, your first generation Dominicana here?
Yes, that's right. Yes.
Oh, I see it coming out now. As soon as I said it, you're like, oh, yes, yes. I said Dominica. You're like, yeah, that's right.
Always represent. Let's go.
So let me start there, right? Now, where did you grow up in? Because it sounds like you've done a lot in Boston. What part of the country did your parents come from Dominican, and where did they land?
Yeah, so everyone from the Dominican Republic, not everybody, but most people at that time, this is a long time ago now, but I'm assuming it's still very similar. A lot of Dominicans either go to Washington Heights or they go to Lawrence, Massachusetts.
Really?
Yes, Lawrence, Massachusetts. It's like little DR. You don't even have to speak English. You literally get to, everything's in Spanish. It
I
is
had
like
no
little
idea.
DR. Yes. I guess a lot of people don't know that. It's a little DR. And back then, like my parents were there. They went as teenagers. So they were in high school there, maybe end of high school. And Lawrence, there, the factories were still there. Lawrence was like a factory city. So you went to work usually, right? Like people went there and they had jobs there. And now all of that is gone, right? We're in a different time. And so Lawrence tends to be more on the impoverished side, right? So it's lower income. But yeah, they landed in Lawrence and they weren't together. I think their families knew each other when they got to Lawrence because it's a small community, but they didn't come married or anything like that. Like they were kind of in their own families, all the families like met each other, all the siblings, all the gajillion siblings met each other and they all knew each other. So yeah, they came to Lawrence, yeah, when they came from the Dominican Republic.
So is that how they met through all the families? Because I have had a lot of people say, yes, they came here and they met at a dance. I've heard
No,
that so
they met
many.
they met in school. They met in high school. They
Oh,
met in high school. I think later on in high school they met and then I mean, they got married very young, which was again common at that time and probably still common, honestly. Like, you get called a vieja if you get married after like 21 or something over there. So maybe that's changed. I don't know. But back then, they got married young. I want to say my mother's gonna kill me if I get this wrong. I want to say they got married when they were like 19, though. Like
oh
really
wow.
young according to our standards today.
Yes.
I'm not sure if it was young back then.
Okay, you want to hear something crazy?
Yes.
My parents, they were in their 20s. My dad was 21 and my mom was 24 when they got married. But my mom had me before she met my dad.
Mm-hmm.
But they dated 3 weeks. And on week 4, they took me to Vegas and eloped.
Oh, snap. See,
Could you
even.
imagine doing that now?
No, no, I cannot. But true love, I
Yeah.
don't
And they're still together. But
see.
the crazy thing is like my grandma came when they came home and told my grandma and grandpa they got married. My grandma was mad, not because they got married, because they didn't get married in a church.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yes.
So they had
Yes.
another wedding, and their second wedding, the church wedding, is on Halloween on October 31st.
Ooh.
So, but it's like for the longest time, I do remember my dad's boss at the time brought me this big bag of candy because I was the flower girl, and I didn't know why. And then years later, I realized, oh, because I was missing out on Halloween, so he wanted to make sure
You
that
got
I
candy?
I got candy,
Oh, I love that story.
and so and my mom to this day, and I don't mean to hijack this, but it just reminded me like the
Yeah.
things that were done back then that we would just be like aghast of now, right? Was my dad took my grandma and grandpa, my mom and me to dinner and to talk about like getting my grandparents' blessing and everything. And that my mom says she was like, my grandparents were like, well, they're a package deal, right? Like you can't have one without the other. And he was
Mhm.
saying how of course, he loves my mom, he loves me. And then my mom, I apparently had to go to the bathroom. And uh my I was like 3 at the time. So like I need to go to the bathroom. And my mom still to this day, my dad will not tell her what he told my grandparents.
My gosh,
To
stop.
this day. And she's like, I missed it because you needed to go to the bathroom. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I was 3. I don't know what you want me to do about it
Come
now.
on. Oh my goodness.
So, but yeah, like being married at 19, getting married after 3 weeks, like those are things that we would just be like, oh no, you are
Mm-hmm.
headed for divorce court like these days.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted, so growing up in that area, being primarily a Latino area or a Dominican area, even more so than just Latino. Um, what was the thing like? Did you? Because I know sometimes when we grow up in a bubble, especially like that.
Yeah.
Did you ever kind of get out of that as you were younger and see different things, different people relate to different things, or start asking questions about who you were?
So I was born in Lawrence, and I'm pretty sure we lived there for a little bit. So my sister is a little older than me, but so she was there probably longer than me because she's a little older. But then we moved to a city that had like a good Latino population too, when I was very young. So I mean, I don't know what age, but I was very young. And then we moved to a different city again, not that far away. And then I was still maybe before middle school. Like I was in it's a city called Lynn, Mass here for most of my childhood, I would say. And then moved for high school, like much further north in Massachusetts. So I would say I always had a strong I always had a strong Latino community because I was always around my family.
Mhm.
So because we have a big family, both my dad's side and my mom's side, they were around a lot. Like I remember weekends of seeing family, seeing cousins. That's how we spent a lot of our time. So I went to a predominantly white school, like K through 8, outside of where I lived. That was not the same place I lived. So I went to school with basically all white kids, essentially. And then, but when I was home, it was totally different. And then on the weekends, it was totally different. So I lived in these two different worlds. And as a child,
You were the Hannah Montana of your time.
I, no, I mean, it's true. Like as a child, I mean, looking back, you see all the ways that you tried to like contort yourself a bit. Like you can see that looking back in hindsight. at the time, I just wanted to fit in regardless of the group I was in. Right. So I would go come home and my mother, we always had the same. She gets on me all the time for saying this, but I will say it. Mommy, I'm saying it again. We had almost the same thing every night. It was la bandera. It was rice, beans, and chicken. And she's like, no, we have steak too. I believe we did have steak sometimes, but it was like rice, beans, chicken, and plátanos. I love plátano maduro a lot. So we ate a similar thing every day, right? We didn't eat like, beef tenderloin and a baked potato and green beans. Like that's like an American type of food. We didn't eat that kind of stuff. And I would come home and I would be like, do we have to eat rice and beans again? Because a lot of my friends at school were American or they were Italian and they're eating pasta. And I'm like, can we not have the Dominican spaghetti? Can we have like a real ziti?
What's
like,
Dominican spaghetti?
Okay, so Dominican spaghetti is okay, take regular spaghetti, like you cook the spaghetti, but then you have like a lot of it's tomato paste and you put adobo in there. And then you put like onions, you put garlic, you put some tomato, like it's a different
That
vibe.
sounds so good.
Yeah, it is not like regular, it's not like a tomato sauce. Like you creating like the salsa with the spaghetti. It's so good. So good that when I was in college, my friends would be like, yo, is your mom coming with that Dominican spaghetti? Because yes. Yes. So always as a kid, I always felt like I was straddling two cultures. And back then, it wasn't cool to be Latino. It wasn't cool to be other. It wasn't. You were other and that was weird. And like, you're not like us. Like you had to choose back then. Like it felt like that. And I never did, but I always felt like that was always a struggle within me. Now it is different. Like I remember in high school is when I heard about the Latin explosion with J Lo and Ricky Martin. And I was like, what? Forever. Like since now it's like, the world coming to like this culture and this community and how beautiful it is and how diverse it is. Like that, I did not feel any type of validation or seen as a Latina as a child in white spaces. That was not my experience. Yeah. And I think today you see that a lot more, which is so good for young people growing up like that.
So I have a question. When the Latin explosion came out, which we're like, okay.
And I'm quoting it. I'm quoting it,
yeah,
right? Like I wouldn't say Latin.
No, yeah, Latin
That's
explosion.
what it is. Yes.
I always wonder how other people feel because when the quote unquote Latin explosion came out, it was very Puerto Rican centered.
Yes, it was.
And did that make it? Because it made me, I mean, as happy as I was, because look, I did listen to Menudo as a kid. I remember Ricky Martin when he was in it, right? Like,
yes.
I remember J-Lo when she was in Mi Familia. And
yes.
So it was one of those things, but it was also kind of a stab in the heart because it was so centered around Puerto Ricans. Did you feel some kind of way about it? I mean, I was happy. Like, I was happy that, as Latinos, like we're finally getting some recognition and flowers. But at the same time, it was like, dude, like the highest population of Latinos is Mexican. And it's like it felt like we were always getting spat on, figuratively.
Yeah, I will say, what's interesting about that is that, I'm a big Selena fan. Like I grew up with Selena, like don't play with Selena with me, right? And she was my introduction to Tejano music. And so I grew up understanding the beauty of black hair, long black hair, like red lipstick and like having a body. And like, that's how I was so proud of that, of her. And learning that music meant a lot to me. And to this day, like I play for my kids, Selena, all the time. And so when the Latin explosion came out, you know what I felt? I felt like, because this was also the time of Shakira, right? When Shakira came out with her English album, right? Yes. And I remember J-Lo, she had blonde hair. Shakira, she has blonde hair. They're fair in complexion. And I remember feeling like, oh, they're more accepting of them because they're more white looking, white passing. Mm-hmm. Right. And I'm not I mean, Shakira's 1000% Colombian, like J-Lo's Puerto Rican, like obviously, and I love them. Like it's not a knock on them, but it's what would be socially acceptable and less threatening to like American culture is like,
Yeah.
oh, you're kind of white too, like just appearance wise. And you dye your hair blonde because Shakira used to have black hair when she was
Yes.
singing in Spanish, right? She did not have blonde hair. J-Lo
Black
had
hair
black
and
hair. J-Lo
bright
had
red
black hair.
hair.
Yes, red hair, yes. And J-Lo had black hair on in Living Color when she was a fly girl.
Mhm.
Like, so I took that message as like, oh, so what's going on? Like, I have to have blonde hair. I have to have fair skin. I have to look white to be accepted because J-Lo, you look beautiful with black hair. And Shakira, you look beautiful with black hair too. So like that's how I took it. I felt like there was this weird message about what is acceptable in terms of your appearance and what will make you more accepted into like American white culture.
Yeah. And I remember that time being also, it was like, so I was never shamed for having it. I had a booty before I had boobs, right? Like the boobs came in when I was like 19. I was like, yo, what happened? Okay, I'm gonna take
I
it.
have neither. I have no.
But I always had it. Like, girl, let me tell you, I was like in high school, still rocking the rompers. You know, rompers are back
Yes,
then.
yes.
I was in high school rocking my rompers, and it framed the booty. And I was a cheerleader and a catcher in softball. So booty was really strong, right?
Trying to
And
go work out.
I never got shamed for that. So
Mm,
when people started talking about Jennifer Lopez's butt and like, oh, she's so curvy, so this and so that, I was like, to me, it was confusing because I was never shamed for that.
mm-hmm,
Like I grew up in a suburb of San Diego in North County called Escondido.
mm,
And it is a kind of, it was a mix of a little bit of everything. You had, you know, Mexicans and Guatemalans and Filipinos and Vietnamese and white, like it was kind of like a little bit of everything. And but I was, like I said, never shamed for that. I was maybe shamed for being chunky, but I wasn't shamed for having a booty,
mm-hmm.
right? Like I grew into my body, like and so I just found it such an interesting conversation because I up until then I didn't know. I mean, obviously you look at magazines and you look at TV and you see everybody who's like this skinny and stick figure and everything, but I never thought of the booty being like a bad thing until
Yeah,
people started praising Jennifer Lopez for breaking stereotypes and for
yeah,
having a curvy body.
yeah,
And the same with Salma Hayek, right?
yes,
And like, oh, she has this beautiful hourglass figure, and Shakira también. It was like,
yeah,
oh,
mm-hmm.
her shaking her hips and hips don't lie and all of that. And I was already an adult at those times.
Yeah,
So it was really interesting to me that, like, although I was like, I know I don't have their body types, I never knew it was a bad thing, or
yeah,
I never knew it was considered a bad thing in the world of entertainment, I guess, until they started coming out and people were like, oh my gosh, they're breaking stereotypes, blah, blah, blah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So you saying you don't have either of those things.
I feel like I don't. I feel like I mean, I work out my booty, but like you can't work something that isn't, you can't work a mass that isn't there, right?
You
Like I
can,
have a
you
little
can. It just
booty, I
takes
have a little
years.
booty, but not like,
Oh yeah, yeah.
like I'm not getting a Brazilian butt lift anytime soon. So nothing more is
Don't do it, girl. Don't do it. Don't do it. It's like that thing. Don't do it, girl. I'm not gonna do it. Don't do it. Like,
listen, I look at celebrities and I'm like, did you I mean, no, I'm not doing that. I heard
yes.
I heard the recovery is very painful.
Yeah, and it's super dangerous. It's like a super
Yes.
dangerous surgery.
Yes. All surgery like that, yes, can be really dangerous for sure. Yeah.
So growing up in like this dual world, were there things that I mean, I'm sure there, because when you're a kid, like you said, you just want to fit in and you grow up and you still want
Yeah.
to fit in. I mean, I think until like we're trying to figure out who we are. And what does that mean in this world and the people and the worlds that I navigate, right? Because if you're navigating in an all Latino world, that's going to look very different than an all white world, and it's going to look different than a bicultural world.
That's right.
So when did you start like understanding that? And did you did you say, okay, this is what I have to do? Or, you know what, I'm not going to let people take my identity away from this. I am Dominicana and I am proud of that. And regardless of what doors I step into, that's who I'm going to be.
I would say, I love the question. I would say that when I was younger, I didn't have the awareness, like really young, right? To really step into that fully and be like, I don't care if you're doing this, like I'm Dominican and I'm proud of it. Like I was always proud to be Dominican, but like when I was very little, I remember asking my parents in the car, be like, okay, do you have to listen to Juan Luis Guerra again? Like, can we listen to Janet Jackson? And they would, like, they played Michael Jackson, Juan Luis Guerra, all different kinds of music, bachata, merengue, salsa, all kinds of stuff. But I remember leaning that way because I wanted to be like my American friends who I went to school with. And I feel like maybe in high school and then definitely in college, where I was like, F this. I was like, this is me. And like, I love myself some plátano maduro and I love myself some pastelón and I like it this way. And I'm proud of the fact that, you know, I've navigated this kind of bicultural kind of world that I'm in. And that is the lane. Like, I thought I had to choose one or the other. But when I went to college, really, was when I was like, oh, it's a new lane I've created, and that's okay. And okay, I'm gonna stand in this lane and I'm gonna really revel in it. And that's kind of how I got a lot of my footing in college. That's really where I realized I don't have to choose because I'm making a unique path for myself. That's where that started to really blossom for me. And then after that, it just went, forget about it.
So
Yeah.
did you go to Boston College?
I did.
Okay, so I'm sure you've read Dirty Girl Social Club, right?
Yes, like years ago though, like
Yes,
years
same,
ago.
same, years ago. Did you feel seen in that? Because obviously the girls meet at Boston College.
Yes,
And I
yes.
was excited because there was the girl Amber, the character Amber, who's from San Diego. They even mentioned my hometown. And I was like, what? Oh my gosh, right? Like, so excited. So when you read that book, I know it was years and years ago. Did that like make you feel seen in a way that you hadn't
Yes,
before?
yes. That book and there's another one that came out around that time where I was like, oh, this kind of this identity of like being Latina, but having different parts of your identity, even as a Latina, and in different like lifestyle and different things you like, and that you're still Latina and you can be proud of that. There was another book like that at that time, and I'm forgetting what it was, but yeah, like I also felt like around that time was when more things were coming out by like Latina authors and movies, and I just felt like, oh, like we're in the mix and I'm being seen and validated much more than when I was a child. Like, when I was in college, we saw, I know Mi Familia is older than that, so I think
Yeah.
it's Mi Familia is from before I went to college. But I remember seeing it in college and seeing this movie called Raising Victor Vargas.
Oh, I haven't seen that one.
That one is good. I mean, now it's old, but it's good. Raising Victor Vargas, and he's Dominican,
Okay.
and
Put it on my
it's
list.
it's this it's a love story, but it's also about his life, and he's like this young kid. Um, I think it's New York City, so it's interesting, and we didn't have things like In the Heights. You know what I mean? We didn't have In the Heights when I was growing up. I can't, let me tell, I'm going to tell you, I cannot imagine what that would have done for me as a child if I was able to see, even in a movie, something like In the Heights. We just didn't have that. And I was talking to my mom about that recently. I'm like, we just didn't have those things. And she's like, we didn't. She's like, you didn't have that. And thank God now your kids do,
Yeah.
you know?
Oh God, I remember, and I know I've said this before too, but I remember when I found out Linda Carter was half Mexican, Wonder Woman, and I was
I
like,
was like, what?
Wonder Woman?
But also, did she ever talk about that?
Yes.
See, okay.
She talks about it a lot.
Okay,
And she's
okay.
very proud of being half Mexican and
Mm.
like, yeah, she's talked about it a lot. But when I first found that out, I think my head exploded with
Yeah.
joy,
I
right?
was like, what? I was like, I had no idea.
Yes, and she's very proud of it. And she talks about it's her mom is Mexican.
Okay.
And so she's talked about like the struggles her mom went through and the things that she taught her. And she's even talked about like, she talks about it because people don't know that she's half Mexican and she's very
Yeah.
proud of that part, that side of her. And it's, I think when you're, especially when you're young, and obviously continues when you're, as you get older, but especially when you're young, when you feel like you have a touch point, like you feel like, oh, I can do that too.
Yes.
Oh, oh, the doors have opened for me. Oh, I can, like when Barack Obama became president, you
Mhm.
had all of these little Black boys and girls going, oh, that means I can be president too.
Yeah.
Right. And now, regardless of how you feel about her politically, but now with Kamala Harris as a Black South Asian woman,
Oh, yes.
as like you have all of these little girls and saying, oh my gosh, I can be president too. And that is so important.
Yes. To see the possibility. You have to see it. Like
Yeah.
a lot of people say, well, you don't have to see it to believe it. And I think you actually do have to see it in many ways, at least be exposed to it.
Yeah.
Um, like when I was growing up and I said I wanted to be a lawyer, I didn't really have, as a young child, I had like Law and Order, and my dad was a probation officer. So I would go with him and I would go into the courtroom and I would see these local lawyers, argue in front of the court, in front of the judge. And I thought that was really cool. I'm like, oh, that's really cool. Like I love the power and the authority they had, even though the judge had all the power. But
Right.
there was something about that was attractive to me. That's exposure. No, I don't think any of them were Latino. I don't remember that, at least. No, I didn't have any like lawyers in my family or anything like that.
But
No.
obviously something spoke to you about them.
Yes, but at least, but see, like sometimes those, it seems like micro moments or tiny experiences make a huge impact,
Yeah.
right? They make a really big impact. And then I even met a judge. I remember I met a Latino judge later on, maybe it was high school, a Latino judge that my dad became friends with. And I got to be in his chambers, like where the judge goes after he's on the bench. They go in the back and it's called their chambers. And I mean, I was talking about some of the cases, and it was just, that was really cool. And honestly, and he was at my wedding. Like I remember that experience because I'm like, "Oh, you're Latino and you're really cool and you're down to earth and you're brilliant and smart and you did this, like you went to law school like 20, 30 years ago." Like, wow. When there's like no Latinos there was no, like hardly any, right? We have very little representation in the law. So like little things like that, they're like seeds. And when
Mhm.
you don't have that, it's really hard to imagine yourself doing something like that when you don't have even those little seeds being planted.
Yeah. So as you go to school, when was that decision? Like you said, because I said I wanted to be a lawyer too. And then my parents said it's just because I want to argue with people.
A lot of people say that.
They're like, you just want to argue. And then I was like, oh, I want to be an entertainment journalist.
Oh, that's fun.
And then I went into PR. But
That's
now, and
fun.
now I do this. But to me, I'm like, oh, I kind of get to envelope all of the things that I said I wanted to do by doing this.
Yeah.
Right. I get to
Yeah.
talk about all of the things. I get to, if I don't tend to argue with people, but if I wanted to, I could.
You still can do that.
So when was that point where that solidified for you that you wanted to go to law school?
I always was gonna go. So I remember at 11, I was like, I'm gonna be a lawyer. And then once I said that, my parents were like, yeah, she's gonna be a lawyer. I'm gonna be a lawyer. That was in high school. I'm gonna be a lawyer. Like, I'm gonna go to law school. I'm gonna be a lawyer. I had no idea what that meant, meaning law school. I did not know what that meant. I didn't know the different kinds of lawyer you could be either. I just saw the ones in court. Like,
Yeah.
that's what I knew. I didn't know there was something called a large corporate law firm. I did not know that at that. I just didn't know. And then in college, I studied so much about inequity and in education affected the Latino community. Like that's what I spent a lot of my time on, my thesis on. And I remember asking my sociology professors for recommendations for law school because I was going to go. Like it didn't matter. It didn't matter the interests I explored further in college. I was going to law school, right? That's what I was telling myself. And so when I approached them to ask them for recommendations, they said, look, we're happy to write you these recommendations. She's like, but they, and both of them in particular, were like, but are you sure you don't want to just get your PhD in sociology and study these things that you've been studying this entire time you've been here? Because you're clearly passionate about it. You clearly have a connection to it, a very personal, like soulful connection to it. And you could be great at this. Like you could be a great professor. Are you sure you don't want to do the PhD? And I was like, nope, I'm going to law school. What I didn't say at the time to them, but what I was thinking, I remember this very clearly, is I'm like, I cannot be poor for 5 to 7 years. Like I'm not doing that. Like I'm not doing it. I need to make money at some point. And I say that because when I was very young, like I grew up with very humble beginnings. My parents weren't making a lot of money. It wasn't like that. I couldn't do things I wanted to do. Like there was no money for me to take dance or to take soccer, whatever people are doing now. There was no money for that. And also my parents worked full time. Who was going to take me? They couldn't afford to hire someone to pick me up from school and take me. So I remember all those things. And I was like, yeah, money will not be a stressor for me in life. Like that's not happening for me. And I assumed, I could have been wrong, but I assumed like, hey, if I go to law school and become a lawyer, I'm going to make some money. At least I'll be working sooner than if I get my PhD, which can take 7 years. And you're paying for that. So, right. So in law school is 3 years, you're paying for it, but it's 3, it's not 5 to 7. So with some ignorance, honestly, I was naive, right? Some of that didn't have all the information. I went to law school straight through. Wouldn't recommend law school straight through, but I did it. And I still believe that it was the best decision I made because every single thing that I've done since then or in my life, I feel like has led me to this moment. Like I really do believe that. Like every single experience you've had is a stepping stone to the next one to get you to where you are. But I often think about that crossroads moment because I ended up teaching at the business school at BC years later, business law for 3 years. Yeah. So it's interesting how like I got to be like a mini professor for but it was fun because it was in my area of expertise. So that was fun.
So then you went into business law.
So I went into I went into a law firm environment after law school, which you could do corporate law, you can do litigation, so courtroom stuff. And I did litigation. But it's a corporate environment in the sense that not everybody's going to court, not everybody's in litigation. There are different areas of law, like real estate law, employment law, like all the different corporate transactions, a whole range of areas of law. And I did litigation, and that's what I was trained in.
So how do you go from litigation? Because I love when people like pivot and transition into something new. Because that's what I feel like. I feel like if you don't, maybe you either totally love what you do, or maybe you're just too scared to do what you love.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And you go from corporate law, corporate litigation to being like an HR executive.
Oh my gosh, yes.
How do you go from, and obviously I would imagine your law degree would serve you very, very well in going into HR, but how do you go from like corporate litigation into human resources?
So I'm going to give you the short version because there were a lot of pivots in between that. Like that's a huge pivot, but it was actually made up of smaller pivots along the way. So when I was at my second law firm, I was at a law firm. I clerked for 2 judges, meaning you write their opinions, you help them with cases. And then I went back to a law firm again. And it was at that law firm that I transitioned out of a law firm into a company where I was in the legal and compliance department in a company. So now your client is your company. Like it's not a bunch of other clients, it's just one. I made that transition that was a big transition because that transition. I talk about this specific transition in the book. Like I really spent a lot of time. I actually opened the book with this story. Um, but it's the story of how when I became a mother, my identity shifted so much and it was unexpected because I didn't realize how much of my identity was really about being a lawyer and not just being a lawyer because of and we haven't talked about this yet, but because of all the things I had to go through to actually like, do well in high school. Like I started high school behind in math and in writing. Like when I got to high school, I was behind so much so that when I was in my English class and I wrote my first paper and we were handing our papers and a week or so later, the teacher hands them back to us. She hands me mine and mine just says like writing tutor. It doesn't even have a grade on it. And she said, come see me after class. And I went to see her and she's like, you need to learn how to write. And I'm like, what? I graduated like number 3 in 8th grade. She's like, yeah, this is a different game here, And I had to catch up. I had to learn essentially how to write. I was behind maybe a year and a half or 2 in math. I had to catch up. So I graduated from high school. I did well in high school, but I had to freaking hustle to like catch up and then be better. And then in college, you go to college with all smart people. Like all of you are smart. Like it's just like who's going to work, who's going to do the work.
And then you have to manage yourself.
That's right. Executive functioning, like organization, like getting your stuff done while participating in causes you care about, right? That's a big big part of the college experience. So I feel like I had to fight so much to prove to others and myself that I was smart enough, that I was capable enough, that I deserved it, that I deserved to be there, right? I went to school K-8, mostly white kids, feeling different, never feeling good enough there. I had a lot of self-worthiness issues coming into my profession, where when you're at a law firm, the standard is perfection. That's what it is. Like, I will never forget, there's so many stories I have, but I will never forget, I sent an email and I was quoting a case. And I put in parentheses after the quote, because I had emphasized something with italics. And next to the sentence, I put in parentheses, emphasis added, period. And the senior associate, because I had sent it to the partner and the senior associate, there's a hierarchy, it's a bunch of BS. So I send this email and immediately she responds to me and she said, Arivee, she goes, next time you need to be more formal. It's emphasis supplied. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. Now at the time, you know what my response is via email? Thank you so much for catching that. I will apply that next time. But inside, I'm like, this is dumb. There's like that standard of perfection makes you feel really shitty because it's like it's the content, what I was saying in the email was correct. But something that's very small is flagged as incorrect. And so you feel like, well, then my work isn't good enough. Like you make things mean a lot of things. And when I had my son and I was finally, and that was earlier in my law firm career, but I just wanted to share that when you grow up when you are an attorney being trained in an environment where it's not just excellence, it's perfection, and you're working and you're hustling and you're by the billable hour every 6 minutes, and your worth is determined by how much you're billing. Your identity gets wrapped up in performing, producing, and proving that you deserve to be there and that you're good and that you're smart. And when you're one of the only Latinas and people of color, you feel that. Like I cannot mess this up for my other people. Like I cannot do that.
I was literally about to ask if you felt
absolutely
extra pressure.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. You know why? Because I saw it. I saw when they would hire like the token person, like the token Black person, like with me, like the Latina, like the only one or the only two in the class. Yo, we better perform because if we mess this up, they're not hiring another Black or Latina person. They're not going to do it. Another Black person or Latina person. And I saw that. I saw some bad hires, or the person wasn't set up for success. And it became like this thing of like, well, we're not going to see another person of color then because if you feel like you're going to ruin it for everybody. And that's a burden and a blessing at the same time, right? Like the blessing in it is, wow, I have this opportunity. Wow, that's incredible. And the blessing is also, wow, it gets to be me, and I get to be a role model and show people that we can, and maybe crush some stereotypes they have, right? Wow, that's really cool that I can do that. But a burden because shit, why do I have to do that? Like that's why do I have to? Why do I have to do that? Why do I have to be the one?
Mhm.
And even when I was thinking of making a partner and what that would mean, I remember I talk about this in the book too, this Women of Color conference for lawyers. And a partner stood up there in front of all of us and she's like, and if you're wondering if you have to be the one to make partner and why you have to be the one, she's like, yes, this is the reality. You have to be the one. Sorry, that's how it is. And I was like, but sometimes it's awful. Like, what if I want to do that? So when I had my son is when I had maternity leave. Thank God I had the privilege of maternity leave for 6 months, which is a big
Oh
deal.
yeah, that's huge.
But I was able to have some space that I wasn't thinking about work and my identity. Like I just crumbled. Like I was like, who am I if I'm not a lawyer? Who am I if I'm not working? Who am I if I'm not billing all these hours? Who am I if I'm not getting constantly validated with work? Because I made the biggest mistake of equating my value with my work, like my inherent human value with my work. Because I felt like I was always fighting to prove myself. And that got really bad. I didn't realize how bad it was until I had my son. And I was like, oh, shoot. And then I had a crisis because I'm like, wait, but now I'm just a mom. Oh my God, that can't be right either. And so I really went through this huge identity shift of okay, I'm a mom and that's a part of me. I'm a lawyer, that's a part of me. I'm also a human and a woman and a Latina, and all these are parts of me. And all of them can coexist. And my value isn't determined by what I do or what I produce. It's just because I have value and God loves me and he created everybody. Like, I started going on this whole journey of what it means to love yourself, and who you are without your title and who you are without your profession. And so that was the biggest reason and the biggest, I would say, catalyst to me saying, I'm okay with not pursuing law firm partnership anymore because it used to be my dream and it no longer is my dream. It's what I used to expect of myself, but things have changed. I feel like I'm meant for something different. I feel like I have some gifts that I'm not using here. And if I'm really honest, I always felt like that. Like even in law school in my first year as a lawyer, I felt like I could be really good at this, but I had this little like voice, this little whisper it sounds like my sociology professors, but it was a little different. It was like, hey, it would like tap me here and there and it would say, are you sure this is what you want to be doing? Are you sure? Are you sure that's what you're meant to do, Arivee? I know you could do this. Yeah, you could be good at this. Yeah, you work hard. Yeah. But is this what you want to be doing? Are you sure? That happened. That happened often, but not often enough for me to pay attention. And then when I had my son, it was like, are you sure you want to be doing this? And
Oh,
that took me, did you just drop your wine? Did you drop your wine?
yes, but I have a little bit. My wait, my two dogs are. I told you they're in here with me,
Yes.
and one of them likes wine and one of them doesn't. So she went down and started licking it.
Oh boy. Oh my God. What's their tolerance level like?
She'll be okay. I thankfully I'll mop this up afterwards, but that's why I have to see. I have a little teeny tiny like travel dust that I'm on instead of like where I normally am.
Oh, yes. Yes.
So me just moving my hand, pow,
Yeah.
there it went.
Yeah.
It's okay. I have more in the fridge.
Oh my gosh.
I'm more concerned of the boxes that my stuff is on than the floor.
On the floor. Yeah.
Because yeah, but continue. This is what
No, no.
happens in life.
I know. Yes. Yes. No, but the transition from law firm really was when I had my son and I had that entire experience on leave. I ended up leaving the firm a year later to go in house to the legal and compliance department where I was for 4 or so years. And I had different roles within that 4 year period. I had more expansive roles. I got promoted 3 times. Like I was doing things within within that department different roles over time, or expanded roles. And then towards that end of that 4-year mark in that department, that voice was like, yeah, see, you're good at this, but this isn't it. I think you need to be doing more of the stuff you do outside of work, which I had already started coaching women outside of work. I had already got my certification because I was interested in it. It made me feel super energized. I love helping women through like different personal and professional crossroads, similar to myself, right? And helping women with self-worth. I was very much into all of that. And so I had already been coaching on the side. At that point, I had already started my Humble Rising podcast because, again, I thought it was fun to talk to women about their stories and like following my curiosity and following things that I was just interested in, what I would want to hear about. And so around that 4-year mark, I was getting that really loud voice being like, you know what? It's time. It's time for you to start merging your worlds. Like, you're not in alignment at work with your career, and you need to start doing that. And so I ended up talking to the people I needed to speak to at the company because I wanted to do more HR, which is more developing our talent. So how could I like coach people at the company, or how could I help our talent develop and grow to reach their potential? I was really focused on that because that's what I could do there. And so I made the ask, and I will never forget our chief legal officer at the time, who was a mentor to me, said to me, oh, so you want to wait? This means you're not going to be a lawyer anymore if you go into HR. Like, if you really want to do HR, you're actually not a lawyer anymore. And I said, I know. And he said, wait, but are you okay with that? And I'm like, yes, absolutely fine with that. He's like, okay, well, that sounds great. Okay, well, we will miss you, but if that's what you want to do, we're going to support you and try to keep you here. And I had the support of even the chief human resources officer. I talked to her, and 8 months later, this is where patience comes in, right? 8 months later, transition into a global head of employee relations role, which is not developing talent. Employee relations is investigations. There's some firing of people, but you're just trying to treat everyone with respect and fairness and equity. Like, you're trying to be empathetic when you're investigating things. And then a year and a half later or so, then I got into the job I really wanted, which was leadership development and executive coaching. And then I hit that point, and it was great. And it was like my dream job. And that's when I knew, I was like, oh, this isn't going to be enough. I got to go in business for myself. Like, this is but again, like a lot of transitions, pivots. I also had 2 more kids within that time period I just explained. But a lot of, I would say, confronting truths about yourself, and accepting that what was once true for you may not be true anymore, and settling and leaning into that a little bit more, not being scared of it. And even if you are scared of it, leaning in even more and getting like super curious and exploring it. And I talk about that in the book a lot too. Like, how do we keep our alignment tight? Like, how do we keep the alignment between what we really feel and what's deep in our souls? How do we keep that aligned to what we're actually doing and pursuing and saying we want? Like, how do we keep that tight? Because if we do keep it tight, the tighter we keep it, the more satisfied we feel, the more like the happier we'll be. And there's research on that too. But I found that personal in my experience and with clients too, that that's the case.
So who, like for me, I know the people that have like, especially early in my career, the
Yeah.
people that advocated most for me were Black women.
Mm.
Who were the people that advocated most for you as you were making these transitions?
Ooh, that's a great question. So I would say in the beginning, it was Black men and Latinas, because I was part of these different Latina professional organizations where I got to meet for the first time like a bunch of Latina lawyers. And I was like, oh my God. And I, to this day, I still connect with them and I meet with them and everything. So I think they were critical in terms of community and getting my name out there. But then I also had these I have a mentor who now we're like more friends, because I mean, this was like 16 years ago or 18 years ago that we met. But who really helped me navigate the law firm environment. Like, he was there at that time. He was an associate and then became a partner. Like, he was really a person that taught me the ropes told me like who to work with, who to not work with. He was the one who was a very critical part of me getting certain clerkships I had. He was probably the primary person that pushed me, like encouraged me, and um, helped me get hired when I went from law firm to to a biotech. Like he was the one who really helped bridge that gap for me. And again, when I got there at the company, because he then was there too, right? He was there too. He showed me the ropes, told me, okay, it's what you need to do, it's what you don't do. You need someone to not only sponsor you and advance your career in that way for opportunities, but to teach you and to like help you see blind spots. And he did that for me. And that was him and another an older Black man who is a legend in Boston. He also was so helpful to me, especially earlier in my career. Yeah. And then even the two judges I worked for, both Black women, and I mean, their wisdom, so spot on at critical times in my life. I'll never forget one of those judges. I was deciding whether I wanted to go to be a federal prosecutor. And I was grappling with the decision. And she said, Arivee, I don't think it's about whether you're going to be good at it. Because I was questioning my ability to be good at it. She's like, it's not going to be whether you're good at it. She's like, you're going to be good at it because you're going to work hard and learn it. She's like, the question is whether you're going to like it. And I was like, right, that part.
There are so many women that tend to have like their quote unquote second act
Mm,
once they hit their 40s. And
yes.
I'm sure this is something that, like, me included, right? I'm fully in that because I think so often, there's all these like 30 under 30, 40 under 40, and sometimes like there can be women that are over 40 that feel like, why am I not being recognized? Like, why aren't 50 under 50 being recognized, 60 under 60 being recognized? What type of women do you tend to work with more
Yep.
often than not? And in regards to, you know, really helping them see that they're, regardless of age, there is value in what they're doing, and there is still value in pivoting in your 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond.
Yeah. Yeah. I love this question. So I specialize in my fellow like first gen and women of color professionals who are in fast-paced environments, demanding careers, especially my fellow Latinas. And you know what's interesting is because I've never not worked in a fast-paced environment. Um, and I think that experience is important when you're coaching women who are, because I understand what the pace and the intensity and how hard you worked in that environment. I understand it because I lived that. I understand what it's like to experience burnout. I've lived that. I understand what it's like to come out of it. And I know what it's like when you're approaching it. Right. And a lot of my clients, a lot of them are actually on the verge of burnout, but they have so many other issues that are attached to it. Like, I have to be working all the time. I have to always be available. If I'm not available, they're going to think I suck. They're going to think I can't hack it. I can't ask for more time. There are all these different stories we tell ourselves that go way back to how hard we had to fight to even be where we are. Right. And so I feel like I'm uniquely positioned to help, essentially my own community. And people that are just like maybe not, not there yet, and I'm a little bit ahead, right? A little bit ahead because I've experienced it and I have a unique set of skills. But what I love about working with our community in particular, especially first gens, I love the transformation that's possible because there's such a gap. And when they start anchoring themselves in actually what they want and like who they actually are, not the dreams that they told themselves, not the expectations that they held to themselves, right? When they really start thinking about how they want to live, how they want to work, like what's true for them, what's not true, what's kind of inherited, what are they just doing because they think they should instead of what's true. It's really powerful to see. Like I just the other day, I was meeting with a client, she's Latina, and her transformation has been ridiculous. I'm like, well, I was on the call with her and I was just like, can I just tell you right now, like what you're telling me, like she said to me, I finally feel like myself, like I'm getting back to myself, meaning my true self. And I was like, do you know how powerful that is to feel like that? To feel like you now have the reins in your life, like you now are leading and not in the passenger seat, because that's what she said she wanted when we started working together. She would say, I feel like I'm a passenger. I feel like I'm reacting. I'm not like leading. And now she's in that seat and you see it, you feel it, even through Zoom, you can feel that energy. And it's so empowering. And to me, it is so inspiring to see that in our, like, I can't tell you how inspiring that is to me.
I think that's like, I love when people find their passion, right?
Oh, yeah.
Or because I think we think like so often, and I think it's crucial for people to know your passion doesn't have to be your business.
No,
Because for some people, once you turn into their business, it's no longer your passion.
no.
So, like, knowing, like, okay, like for me, I love to talk, obviously. Hello, wine and chisme, like, right?
And I maybe argue.
And maybe argue. But I mean, I've always been, ever since I was a little kid, like I was that little kid, a new student would come be like, hi, I'm Jessica. Tell me all about you, blah, blah, blah. Like I want to know everything. That's still who I am.
Yes.
Now I
Yes.
get to just, now I get to just share those experiences and drink wine and record it and share it with
Yeah.
clients. But ultimately, that's been at the core of who I've been since
That's
I was
right.
born. Like that's always been something innate in me, is wanting to learn about people and wanting to hear their experiences and everything. And
Yeah.
I think so often, and what I've learned actually is recently, like talking to people, oftentimes when people start pivoting later in life, they start pivoting to what they wanted to do when they were a kid. Is that something that you found?
Yeah. I found that to be true for for some clients, not all. But for me, like I always was like a listener and an observer, always. I love to like have my ear and to learn from people. And I I then became someone in like high school and college and law school that people would go to for advice. I became like that kind of person. And I always loved teaching. I always loved to give perspective. And as a lawyer, that makes sense. You are an advisor, but it wasn't the right kind, the one that was really activating my soul, right? It was one kind, but it was like, wasn't the right kind. And so I would say that that's true for me. Like it took a reactivation like of my purpose and my soul. Like I really, it was, I would say it was a reactivation, never gone, but you have to kind of find it again. And for some people, though, like you said, their passion isn't going to be their work. And so my question is always, well, what purpose does your work serve? You know, like be really clear about that. Because if you don't know what that is, it's really hard to stay in a job that you're like, this sucks. But if you feel like, okay, this part sucks, this part is pretty good, the pay is really good, and the pay allows me to do X, Y, and Z, which I value highly, like maybe travel, spending time with friends, you know, taking your kids places, I don't know, whatever it is for you that you think is most important. It you know, it's easier and you make peace with it more easily. So a lot of what I work with people on is, okay, if you can't change your situation because it's out of your control, because some things are not in your control, how do we make more peace with it then? Because I cannot tell you how many women come to me and they say, I just want to feel inner peace. And I'm like, what the F does that mean? What does it look like? What does it look like? There can't be total disconnection from your phone and total disconnect from the world and you living on a mountain in isolation, because that's also not the life you want. So what does that mean? You want to feel tranquil, calm, inner peace? Like what does that life look like? And then we go after that. We paint that and we just go literally charge forward. And again, so inspiring when you hear someone say, we did that vision exercise, that 1 year vision exercise. And I feel like I am really close to that. And we haven't even hit like 3 months. And I'm like, that's right.
You
That's
know
what
what?
we
I
have
need to
to
do
really
that
do.
again, because when I had a business coach and we actually ended up talking about my personal life,
Yeah.
she had me write down my five non-negotiables, like
Yes.
my exact five non-negotiables.
Yes.
And mine were have a sense of humor, somebody who loves my family and that my family loves,
Yes.
somebody who is community minded,
Yeah.
somebody who has a passion, who's passionate about something outside of work,
Yeah.
and somebody who, even if they're not the best communicator, is willing to learn how to communicate.
Yes.
And let me tell you, my husband hits all of,
Yes.
he makes me laugh so hard every day. Sometimes I can't breathe. Like, you okay?
I love
You all
that. I
right?
love that. I
You
love
know,
that.
he comes from a family who his tia was Helen Chavez, Cesar Chavez's wife.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Legendary.
And my mother-in-law is still part of the board for the Farm Workers
Wow.
Association. My
Community minded.
Yes, my family loves him. He loves my family, and he is getting better at communicating.
Yeah.
And I was like, because she was like, not six, not seven, five. She was like very specific.
Yes.
You have
Yes.
to think of the five most important things. And he literally hit all five things.
Yes.
And she had me write down, like, what is a perfect day? And this is before me and him even met.
Mhm.
And the reason I'm sharing this, mi gente, is because it's truly the power of putting pen to paper and what
Yes.
doing that, because she told me to write down my perfect day, and I wrote down, like, I wake up and we do this and we do that, and he tells me to get dressed, and he ends up surprising me with like a dinner cruise on the bay. And although it wasn't exact, he was like, hey, I have a surprise for you. And he took me on the ferry across the bay, then treated me, then we had dinner, and then we went to a movie, and I was like,
See? See?
oh my God, like, he never read this. He never knew about this. This
Yeah.
was like a year and a half before we even met that I wrote
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
And literally, it may have not been exactly the same, but the whole
Yes.
process was there.
Yes. Yes. Those non-negotiables. Yes. It's core values. It's your priorities. It's things. It's all reflection of that, right? What matters most to you, those five non-negotiables. And the non-negotiables are things that you do not, there's no wavering. Like that, those are the five things. And for people who maybe it's not for a partner, like what you want in a partner, but maybe it's like my five non-negotiables for like how I live my life, which reflect core values. Right? A lot of people, their core value is freedom. That's one of mine. Freedom, like time freedom, money freedom. Why? Because I want to be able to spend time in my life on the things that matter most to me. I want to spend time with people who I adore. I want to spend time experiencing new things and traveling and living my life fully so that when I am 90, hopefully 90 or 100 and I go, I can say I freaking lived my life. I didn't wait. I didn't succumb to like other people's expectations. I didn't live other people's lives. I lived mine. And I was constantly trying to get closer to like my best life and my best self. Right. And that I love the non negotiables because it gets you focused and specific. And then the visioning you did, which is what you did, that 1 year perfect day. I do a 1 year and I do a 20 year in the book, a visualization where it's recorded. So you can in the book, you can scan the QR code and it's me as my voice. And it's like a whole breathing exercise and the visualization. And then you journal exactly what your vision is. That's so important because your brain remembers when you're able to visualize, it remembers it. And then you write that down and your brain is like, oh, this is really important because you're writing it down. It's really important. And we can't, as you said, like the power of writing something down that you've visualized is critical because how many times do we think of things and we don't write them down and we forget them?
Yeah.
But when you write that down, your brain is like, oh, I need to pay attention. Oh, and then your brain starts scanning for that thing. It's like it's a lens, it starts scanning, and you're more likely to achieve those things.
That's why I did so well, like, or when I wanted to do well in school.
Yeah.
This is why I did, because I learned how to take notes, and
Yes.
I was a very good note taker.
Yes. Yes.
And so, and to me, I was like, if I'm writing it down, I'm going to retain it. And if then I can do it, but I can't just watch it. I have to do it.
Yes.
Right. But Arivee, like, this hour, like, we've already,
I
like,
know.
how I could literally sit here and talk to you for another hour because you just have so like I'm just sitting here. I kind of have a girl crush now. Like I'm just sitting here going, "Oh my gosh, she's so smart. She like
Oh.
really knows what she's doing." Um, so if people want to work with you, how do they get in touch with you?
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn, so you can reach me there. You can also reach me at ariveevargas.com, which is ARIVEE period Vargas. No, that's my email. Don't.
And she wasn't drinking, ladies and gentlemen.
It's okay. I'll leave you back if you let me. It's ariveevargas.com if you want to get in touch that way. But I'm on LinkedIn a lot. So if you just DM me on LinkedIn, I'll respond. And
And
then I
all
have
of this will
the
be on the show
podcast.
notes.
Yeah. And the podcast is the Humble Rising podcast, which is available on every platform that you can think of for podcasts.
So I always like to give people, if there's something we didn't touch on, because I know we kind of touched on a lot of things.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you would like to add?
The only thing I would add is, and this may seem out of left field a little bit, but I really want to encourage people to place their emotional, their mental, their spiritual, their physical well-being at the top of their priority list every single day. It's really important that we do that. We were not raised to do that. I didn't see my parents rest. I saw what it meant to work hard and self-sacrifice. I saw that as a child. They didn't have to tell me what was happening. I saw it. And I think we internalize that and we repeat that pattern, even though if our parents could have done it differently, they would have. They just couldn't at that time. They didn't have the tools and they honestly didn't have the ability. They were working so hard. So now we have a different opportunity to break that cycle and to not be literally killing ourselves for some idea of success. Like we really have to redefine success for ourselves. And part of it has to include making yourself a priority. So I really want to make that point because I think we put ourselves last way too much.
I agree with you. Well, there's nothing else to say because that's a great way to end it. So, Arivee, thank you so much. I really appreciate like everything that you've shared. I will like mi gente, please follow her on LinkedIn, follow her on socials. Like if you connected with her, reach out because I think so often we're like, yeah, I'm gonna do it, I'll do it later, and then we
We
forget
don't
about
do
it
it.
or we let the time
Yes.
pass. So if you
Yes.
feel that connection to reach out, reach out.
And pre-order the book. Pre-order Your Time to Rise on Amazon now.
Yes.
Pre-order that book. Yes.
All right. Well, muchísimas gracias, Arivee, and mi gente. Until next time.
Gracias. Thank you so much.
Hola, mi gente. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Wine and Chisme podcast. If you would like to hear more wine and more chisme, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Saludos.